Okay, everyone. Hello. Welcome to this episode of SNEED-CAST. I'm your host, Alexa, and today we're here with none other than David Holliday, who happens to be the creator and editor of Packaging News Net. So hello, David. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Alexa, thank you very much for the invite. How are you doing today?
So far, so good. How are you?
I am fabulous, thank you. I'm in New Hampshire, and today it actually feels like spring for the first time this whole year, which is fabulous.
Yeah, no, so we've been going back and forth in terms of like our weather and how everything feels here in Texas. But I'm glad to hear that you guys are getting some nice weather up there.
Yeah, it had to happen sooner or later.
Oh, yeah. But let's give our audience a little background. So, you actually got your BA in mathematics from the Open University. You've been in the industry now for 3 decades and you've held a variety of roles. So, everything from being an apprentice for an engineer to also being a research and development technician to working within the sales and marketing space as well as product management. And one of the biggest accomplishments I think is that you now have over 1,000 packaging blogs. So kudos. And you've also been featured in some big publications like Dairy Foods and Snack and Bakery, correct?
Absolutely. And I actually started off blogging really just at the same time blogs were invented, I think. So I've been doing that for a while. Um, First of all, with my own blog, which I then turned into the company's blog where I was working at the time. And then since then, I've started Packaging Newsnet, which is a couple of years old now and is starting to get some pretty good traction actually with the website, with our LinkedIn pages, and the little videos that we're putting together as well. And I'm looking at starting a podcast actually too. My plan is to get Ken signed up as a guest at some point.
Oh, nice. I'm pretty sure he'd love to jump on. And then if we can talk a little bit, or if we can start getting into what we're going to be focusing on today. So I know a lot of our consumers, and even me as a consumer, we all see barcodes. They're obviously in our day-to-day life. But how is it that barcodes actually came to be? Like, what's their origin story, if you don't mind filling us in?
Hey, no problem at all. And I think it's quite an interesting story. And it really started off way back in the 1950s when there was a big increase in production after the Second World War, particularly in the United States, as a lot of industries were being built up, the automotive industry, the aerospace industry. And also while that was happening, how people went shopping was changing as well, from popping down the corner shop and buying a few items that you might need into large supermarkets. And as a result of these changes, it became apparent that there had to be a way to keep track of things, whatever those things happened to be. And the very first barcode patent was was entered by a couple of guys from Drexel University in Philadelphia, Joseph Woodland and Bernard Silver. And they were prompted to investigate barcodes at the request of the retail industry. Because as these stores were starting to grow and people were going to the checkout and the cashier was having to literally type prices and information in on a cash register, it was very slow and there were a lot of mistakes. And so Woodland and Silver developed a barcode format that they thought could help that industry. It didn't really, as it turned out. The barcode they had was kind of a bullseye shape. It almost looks like someone had cut a tree down. And you look at the trunk of the tree, you see all the rings where it's grown. Their barcode kind of looks like that. But I think we can say that was the first step. And they looked at refining that over the years. And it took a little while to get barcodes for products in retail under control. And in the meantime, somebody else beat them to the punch for being the first commercial barcode application. And it was a guy called David Collins, and Mr. Collins worked for a company called Sylvania, and he came out with a barcode system for tracking railroad assets, the locomotives and the trucks and all of these things, because as the railroads were growing, these railroad cars were ending up all over the country. No one knew where the heck they were. And he actually came out with a barcode system called CarTrack that was in use, not for all that long, for about 10 years, but it was the standard way of keeping track of railroad cars. And it basically had a multicolored barcode that was stuck on the side of the railroad trucks and scanners by the tracks that would read them as the trucks went by. And as I say, it was in use for about 10 years. It had a few problems. It wasn't 100% reliable. The scanners would get dirty because of the weather and snow over them and things like that. And in the end, it was phased out. And there's other technologies that are used there today. But Joseph Woodland, in the meantime, was working behind the scenes, and he was working with IBM, a company that I'm sure you're aware of. And they came out with a new barcode that is what we now call the UPC code. And that won the battle to be the retail barcode of choice for items that are scanned in stores. And it was actually nearly 51 years ago that the very first UPC code was scanned in a store in Ohio. And it's been a way of doing it for all of those years, although that's going to be changing in the next few years, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, no, so I was actually going to add on. I actually worked at the front end of a grocery store for all of like a good 3 years. So barcodes were definitely a lifesaver. I cannot imagine having to memorize prices for every item. But talking about barcodes and how they're helping out, can you talk a little bit about how they're helping to streamline inventory and supply chain management?
Yeah, absolutely. And what really helped was that as barcodes were being developed, it also coincided with the growth of computers and databases. And the barcode on a package, which by now was almost always the UPC code in retail, it became the link between a product and those databases. And the barcodes would be on each of the levels of packaging. So on individual items that you or I would go and buy in the store, and they would be on the shipping cases that those items are shipped in, and then finally you would have a barcode on the pallet. And so if someone had a loaded pallet, you could scan the barcode on the pallet because you know what's on it. You can effectively log all of those items from the manufacturer to the store where they're going to be sold at different points through the supply chain. And then once those pallets are taken apart and an individual product sits on the shelf in a store and a customer buys it, at that point, when it's scanned, one, as you know, the scanner beeps and the price is added to the customer's order that they're going to take, but it also diminishes the inventory by that one item. So now, rather than having to manually keep track of inventory in the stores, it's all done automatically through those one beep at a time through scans at the checkout. So it seems a very simple system, but there's quite a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes.
And then I know over the past couple of years, so we've gone from like shopping at stores or physical locations to now favoring like e-commerce. How have barcodes evolved in the digital age with the rise of e-commerce and then omnichannel retailing?
That's a really good question, and I'm sure that you like the majority of us order stuff from Amazon, or you order stuff from Walmart online, or whatever store, right? It's just so easy and so convenient these days, and
Right.
you'll see that every box or bag that arrives on your doorstep from Amazon actually has a number of barcodes on it, some linear barcodes and some square 2D barcodes. And the reason they're there is to ensure that that package can automatically be tracked through Amazon or Walmart or Target, whoever distribution it is, or UPS or FedEx, can be tracked from end to end of that supply chain so that it's known where it is and it can be delivered at the right time to the right person. Frustrating on those occasions where it doesn't, but it usually does. And the other thing that's really cool is that UPC code that's on a product, the data that's encoded in it is a number, and it's the rather grandly named global trade item number for that particular product. And that's what you scan in the supermarket when your scanner beeps and the customer gets charged for what they've bought. But also that GTIN, that global trade item number, is the lookup key for a database. And the standards organization that manages all of our barcodes, GS1, they have a database called the GDSN. And the GDSN network actually includes all the attributes for the product. So it would include all of the nutritional information, it would include allergen information, which is really important, and hugely important for e-commerce is in that database are product photos. And you probably noticed that if you go to Amazon and you look up a product, and then you go to Target and you look up a product, the photos are the same on all the e-commerce sites. And that's because they're all coming from this global database that holds all of these attributes for the product. So not only are barcodes making sure that the products are shipped at the right time and go the right route and end up at the right person, they also help upstream of that in helping you decide what you're going to buy with all of these attributes and all of these product photos. So it's very, very cool stuff.
See, I actually hadn't realized how much information was actually being tracked through barcodes. And I actually hadn't noticed that across different sites, those same visuals are being used. So that's something interesting.
Yeah, take a look. The next time you're looking to buy something and you're looking at multiple sites, you'll see that a lot of the visuals are exactly the same, and so they can be downloaded from the database to the e-commerce sites automatically. So no one is having to build those pages up every time, which would be a really painful job because there's a lot of items.
And then, David, you had actually mentioned something earlier about how we're currently using UPC codes. But what are some of the current trends that you're seeing in barcode technology? Like, what are some of the different changes that companies can now expect?
The biggest thing that we're going to see in barcodes, and I would say it's the biggest thing since 51 years ago when the first UPC code was scanned, is that the standards organization, GS1, has an initiative to effectively replace those linear UPC codes with 2D barcodes, either data matrix barcodes or QR codes. And they can hold a lot more data. Right? So a UPC barcode holds exactly one piece of data, that GTIN number. And it's fine as far as it goes. You can use it to track products, you can use it for inventory, and you can use it for all of these attributes, the photos or the other information. But that number, while it's unique to a type of product, isn't unique to an actual product. So if I say go to the store and I buy a 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola, every 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola has that same GTIN number. It's a static number for that product. Whereas the new barcodes, and they're part of a program that GS1 calls Sunrise 2027, because 2027 is the year that it's believed that we'll have a critical mass of people going in that direction to make this valid. The barcodes used for that will contain a lot more information. So they will contain the GTIN number so that the person who is scanning items at the cash register will be able to scan a 2D barcode and it will beep and the customer will be charged just as it does with the linear barcode today. But also encoded in the data can be the lot number, the expiration date, perhaps a unique serial number, so that now my 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola is unique and it's different to every other 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola if I wanted to do that. But for a retailer, where this is really cool is that, let's say this particular product is part of a lot or a batch that's been recalled. When it's scanned, because the lot number is in the barcode, it will transmit that to the back-end software that can say, hey, this product's been recalled, you really shouldn't be selling it. And it will warn the cashier, and it will warn the customer. Same thing with the expiration date. If the expiration date is expired, the customer can be warned at that point. So that's already a lot more useful than just the UPC code. But the other thing that's really cool is that one of the options in this Sunrise 2027 program is to use what's called a GS1 digital link QR code. Right, and you're familiar with QR codes, right? We can scan them with our phones and we can find stuff. And these work in very much the same way, right? So whereas today's UPC code just has that one number encoded in it, the digital link QR code can have a web link to product information or coupons or recipes or recycling information, whatever the brand who owns it wants to show their customers. And it can also still be scanned at checkout for the usual scan at checkout things. It has the lot number, the expiration date, all encoded in it. So it's a really powerful barcode. The most exciting thing to happen in certainly in barcodes that I can remember in those many decades that you mentioned earlier. It's really cool stuff, and it's moving along pretty quickly. And what you're going to see to start with is companies or brands are going to put both the barcodes on a product. So the UPC code, which is nearly always pre-printed, but the GS1 data matrix or the GS1 digital link code, because they now contain production information, they're going to be printed at the time of packaging. So you'll have one pre-printed barcode, the UPC, and one printed on demand barcode, the 2D barcode. And then after a transition period, when the whole retail industry can handle these 2D barcodes, you can eliminate the UPC barcode completely and just have the single 2D barcode, which will do all of the jobs. So it's very cool stuff.
This episode of the SNEED-CAST is proudly brought to you by the SNEED-JET Freedom 41. The Freedom 41 features an impressive 4-inch tall stitch printhead enabling clear printing of barcodes, logos, dates, batch codes, lot codes, and other traceability information. With a 300 dpi printing capability, it delivers high-resolution prints. This versatile printer supports both water-based and solvent-based inks, allowing you to print on various materials such as plastic, glass, pipes, metals, boxes, paper, concrete, and more. Experience the freedom of large-scale printing and simplify your printing task with our maintenance-free thermal inkjet technology.
Mm-hmm. And then when we're actually talking about transitioning from just like your UPC codes to your now like 2D barcodes, what challenges are companies going to be facing, would you say, within the next like 2 years or so?
I think that they have a number of challenges, actually, because while I think there's a lot of benefits to this, there are also some issues that need to be confronted. One of them is that the package is, in a lot of cases, is going to have to be redesigned, because the second barcode, the 2D barcode, has to be positioned close to the UPC code so that when the item is scanned in the store, they fit in the field of view of one scanner. So there's some package design that has to be done there. And that can be, if you have 1 million SKUs in your product line, that's a lot of packages to redesign perhaps. So there's that, which is kind of a logistics thing. And also there's the fact that since the UPC code is 99% of the time already printed on the package, so the folks on the packaging line don't even have to worry about that. Like, they've got enough things to worry about with the packaging and date coding and closing the package, everything else that has to be done on a packaging line. But now they're going to have to be able to print that 2D barcode on the package next to the UPC code, which means they're probably going to have to invest in new date coding equipment. Good news for companies like yours, perhaps. So they're going to have to do that. They're going to have to perhaps invest in different barcode software in order to produce those barcodes. And it's also very important, they're going to have to make sure that the barcodes they print meet the quality standard. Because if there's one thing the big retail companies love to do, it's to backcharge their suppliers for out-of-spec barcodes. So it will be critical that the barcodes that are printed on the package meet the quality standard, and also that the data is encoded in the proper format. Because again, if it doesn't scan, it becomes a big issue. As you know from your in the store experience, if barcode doesn't scan, you've got to physically now type the number in, which is a painful process, right? Or it would be for me.
No, I definitely had my fair share of products whose barcodes didn't scan, and it got to the point where I would then remember that UPC code and have to type that in multiple times a day. So yes, I'm very familiar.
Sad, but true. So one of the important criteria with the 2D barcodes is that they don't cause any disruption at the checkout. You know, whether it's the store cashier that's doing the checkout or whether self-checkout, regardless, they have to scan. And the only way that we know that they're going to scan as consistently as the existing UPC code is if they meet the quality standard and if the data is encoded properly. And that, I think, is where, you know, people like you and I have the mission of helping the customers, right, the folks on the packaging lines who need to be able to produce these barcodes, to give them all the information they need and all the advice they need as far as choosing the right print technology, integrating them into their packaging machines, and so on and so forth. So I think it's an area with quite a few challenges, but I think it's going to be worth it just for the benefit of everybody involved in the whole supply chain, from, you know, from the brand to us consumers. I think it's a good deal, but there is a little bit of work to be done. In fact, there's a ton of work to be done.
It sure sounds like there's tons of work to be done. And since we're talking about how barcodes are going to be changing within the next year or two, where do you think barcodes are, or how do you think barcodes are going to evolve over the next, like, say, 5 to 10 years? What are we looking at?
Well, I think a big part of that time period is going to be the Sunrise 2027 project coming to fruition. You know, 2027 was a date that the feeling was that there'll be a critical mass of point of sale systems that can handle the 2D barcodes and the data behind them at that point. But that's going to continue to roll out over the next few years, because not every brand is going to be ready to do it. And brands don't even have to change. If a brand prefers to just keep their existing UPC code, they're very welcome to do that, other than they obviously don't get the benefits. And it may be that at some point their retail customers push back on them and say, hey, we want the proper barcodes now, please. But other than that, there's no time frame when the old barcode is going to be phased out. So there's some transition period. I think is going to take several years at least before it comes to fruition. So that's going to take up some of this period for innovations, is getting that one sorted. As far as technologies, I think that RFID technology is going to continue to grow in a lot of applications, particularly supply chain, and more now for individual units in stores. And I don't know how familiar you are with the RFID story and Walmart in the past, but Walmart came out with an RFID mandate for their suppliers, and it was probably 10 or more years ago now. It didn't go well, and it was abandoned after a while. And the reasons it was abandoned is that the technology wasn't ready, and the RFID tags, which are great, right? You don't have to be close to them to scan the data as you would with a barcode scanner. You can just run them past an antenna and that the antenna will read the tags on the products, in theory at least. At that point, they read the tags sometimes, so it wasn't hugely successful. But since then, after sort of stepping back and thinking about it for a while, Walmart have introduced an RFID mandate for a number of their departments. They actually started off with clothing. So most clothing items that if you go into a Walmart store, you'll see they have a label or a hang tag that has an embedded RFID antenna in it. And their reasoning for this is that it makes it so much easier for inventory control, because in the stores, and I know this because my wife makes a real mess when she's looking for clothing racks and shelves in the stores. The inventory ends up all over the place, right? And so to see what they have is really difficult. But if you can just walk around the area with a handheld scanner and it captures the data from all of the items that are there, that's really helpful for a retail store. And Walmart have rolled this out and it's working pretty successfully. They've moved now beyond clothing, I think, into electronics and into sporting goods and things like that. So it's only a matter of time, I think, that just about every Walmart store will have every item with an RFID tag, as well as one of the new GS1 barcodes on it. So RFID is definitely growing. It's still very big in aerospace and the defense industry and things like that. So that's happening. The other innovation that I've seen hanging around for a while, and I think its time is really coming, is a company called Digimarc. And Digimarc is a company that invented this watermarking barcode system. And it's kind of cool because the barcode just consists of a series of dots that are repeated over a complete package. And unless you really look for them, you're not going to see them. But a lot of point of sale scanners can actually read those now. And I was at a GS1 conference a couple of years ago, and one of the speakers was from Wegmans stores. And Wegmans is like a big, really good supermarket up here in the Northeast. They're kind of out like HEB down your way. And the Wegmans guy was saying that all of their private label products already now have Digimarc barcoding. So if they have a label, say a label on a bottle of salad dressing, it's not just the barcode on the back of the package. The entire label is now the barcode on both the front and the back of the package. And so if you're the cashier, and he said one of the problems they have with the cashiers is they get a lot of sort of repetitive motion injuries where you're constantly having to turn things around on the belt to face where the scanners are. But now that the whole package is the scanner, you can now read it from anywhere, which makes it easier for the cashiers. They can feed more things through the scanners, which is half the battle. And he also showed I thought was quite a nifty thing. You know how sometimes people put heavy items underneath their cart on the bottom of the cart and push it through the checkout? And sometimes they maybe forget to tell the cashier that those are there. But if you have, say, those big trays of water bottles or things like that, and they have this watermark barcode over that whole package, you have a scanner either side at about knee level. Then when someone wheels the cart through, it grabs that data and charges the customer. So he said it speeds up the checkout. It reduces repetitive stress injuries for the cashiers, which hadn't even occurred to me that could be an issue, but you probably know more about that than I do. And it also can help prevent people from sneaking things through the checkout without paying for them. And the other thing that's really cool with Digimarc is it can be embedded onto plastic bottles and things like that at the time they're molded. And then those watermarks can be used for sortation systems in recycling streams. Because one of the big problems with recycling is separating, right, all the different kinds of plastics and things like that. But as this Digimarc technology is being introduced there, a lot of that can be automated. So there's a lot going on with the Sunrise 2000 stuff, with RFID continuing to grow, with initiatives like Digimarc, which really are cool. And I've actually had some samples of their labels and played with them. And they're really fun, those Digimarc watermarks. It's really hard to see they even exist, but they 100% scan all the time.
See, it's conversations like this that make me wonder why wasn't this technology available when I was working as a cashier? Just because, again, repetitive motion is something that you deal with, and it's not something that I guess other consumers take into account unless you're working in that type of work. Um, but with that being said, do you think that technologies like RFID tags and the Digimarc barcodes are eventually going to replace traditional like UPC barcodes, or do you think it's something that's just going to complement what's currently already in play?
I think that we're going to see new technologies come that work alongside a lot of the existing ones. Theoretically, the one barcode that could disappear would be the UPC code, because that can effectively be replaced by either the GS1 data matrix or the GS1 digital link if all the brands get on board with that. So I think that's in jeopardy. But no one is telling anyone that you've got to stop using it. So far as I'm aware, there's no date for its retirement. But I think we're going to see more and more 2D barcodes, just because you can put more information into them in a smaller space. And that's going to be one thing I think that will be an advantage for brands, is that if they can put a smaller barcode on their package, other than all the advantages of it being a 2D barcode, they also free up some space. So they have more space for their fancy marketing graphics and their messaging and anything else that they want to do. So I see, yeah, RFID is going to continue to grow, but I think it's going to be complementary with barcodes. So I think barcodes are going to be around for a while yet.
And then a question that I have, because I know that we talked about how implementing new barcodes like that 2D barcode could potentially pose like packaging design challenges. But when we're talking on like a global scale, what challenges do brands face when implementing barcodes in terms of like their global supply chains and varying regulations?
I think the regulations is always a challenge, and even here in the US, different states have their own regulations, and we're seeing that already with the EPR, the Extended Producer Responsibility rules, where manufacturers of polluting plastic products are being expected to pick up the bill for cleaning up the mess that they make. But we don't here have like one rule. The states that have done it all have their own, and they're all somewhat different, which makes it very difficult for manufacturers to keep in compliance with all of them. And then when you add to the fact that different countries are coming up with their own rules now, the EU has EPR rules for the cost of recycling, but at least they have the advantage that because it's more centralized, that all the countries have the same rule. And then going kind of to the extreme of this, in South Korea, there's a packaging rule that's due to come into force early 2026 that is going to ban the use of labels on plastic water bottles. And that's a huge thing to do, because you can immediately say, well, how do you know what's in the product? What is it? If it's just a plain bottle, where does the barcode go for the checkout and things like that? But they're serious about doing it. There's a number of trials. In fact, some companies in South Korea have already started to implement this, where because the bottles are molded, they can kind of mold their logo directly into the plastic of the bottle and things like that, so that you can see what it is. And then for the rest of the information, they're printing a GS1 digital link QR code right on the top of the cap. And so by someone in the supply chain or the retail store or the consumer scanning that QR code, that digital link QR code, they can get all the information on the product. But that's a huge step. And I don't know. I can't see something like that being implemented here anytime soon. And if we did, we'd have 50 different versions of it, one from each state, right?
Yeah, I was
So
just gonna
that
say, I don't think we're ever gonna have anything that cohesive.
so, but that's, they're serious about it there. It's unless someone changes the law between now and next year, it's going to happen. And again, it's one of these situations where a lot of these legislation changes affect companies, such as yours, who provide coding and marking equipment, because to do that data digital link QR code on the top of water bottles, and water bottle packaging lines run at outrageously high speeds. So there's that really high speed, high precision printers that are needed, but already people are starting to produce them and get them into those plants. So all of these things create opportunities for somebody down the line. And I think with everything that's happening in the barcoding world, that being in the coding and marking business is a pretty cool place to be at the moment.
It sure sounds like it. I was actually going to ask, with a career spanning over 3 decades now, what would you say are some of the most significant changes you've seen within barcode technology?
Well, interestingly, in my very younger days, I can still remember my mother being very annoyed. And this was back in the UK. It wasn't in the US. So barcoding in supermarkets came to the UK quite a bit a few years after the US. But my mother was really annoyed at the fact that people were scanning barcodes rather than the cashier typing in the price, because she felt that scanning the barcode was going to be more prone to error than the person typing on a keyboard or on a cash register. Now, we all know that the complete opposite to that is true. So that introduction of barcodes to retail is one of the biggest things, certainly in my lifetime. Introduction of RFID into the defense supply chain was a very big deal as well. And it was also a lot more successful than Walmart's early efforts with RFID. And it helped that you were putting the expensive tags onto very expensive products. So whereas the defense contractor could afford to pay for them, the Walmart supplier couldn't necessarily. So there was that difference. And then also the growth in 2D barcodes. For, again, the defense, you don't think of the Department of Defense as necessarily being a supply chain pioneer, but one of the first applications for data matrix barcodes was a program that the American Department of Defense put into place for keeping track of all the items that they own. They called it UDI, unique device identification. And what it meant is, in the past, they had no idea what assets they had. And they were quite often, when they were having the wars in the Middle East, quite often there'd be someone at an airbase who needed a part, and they'd have to ship those parts in from the US, but they actually had them in their own inventory, but no one knew. So this unique identification of defense parts became a really big deal, and that was really something that got barcoding moving in the right direction. And then, of course, now we've got the Sunrise 2027, which looks to be the biggest change of all of them, which is really exciting.
Yeah, no, it's not until you get into this industry that you realize just how applicable barcodes really are, not just like within the manufacturing space, but also in other areas. So last question, David. Since we work with so many small to medium-sized businesses, what advice would you give to any packaging professionals out there or CPG brands looking to innovate with barcodes or other related technologies that we spoke about today?
I would say that if anybody is a CPG brand, oh look, my little dog is running around in the background. If someone looking to get into that anything that's sold at retail, they really need to pay attention to the new 2D barcodes and what they can do for them. there's a really good implementation guide that GS1 has produced, and I'll send you a link to that. If that you might want to share that in the notes for the podcast, perhaps. But that's something that was that a lot of people worked on over a period of 2 or 3 years, and I worked on part of it as well, actually. But it really tells you everything you need to know in order to be able to get going with these new barcode concepts and how they can help you, good things to do, things to avoid. And I think as well, it's important that, when you talk to your partners who provide you with coding equipment, that you make sure that they know exactly what it is that you need to do, so that you don't, have any slip ups as you start to introduce these things.
Right. Well, that's great advice. Thank you so much. And then I just wanted to say thank you for all of the great insights today. I feel like this was definitely eye-opening. I feel like barcodes can sometimes get a little bit confusing just because of how much information they really do contain. But I know that our viewers are going to find this just as interesting as I did. So thank you so much, David.
Brilliant. I appreciate the invite to chat about this. It's a fun topic.
Of course it is. And then I was going to ask, are there any websites or blogs that you would like to just highlight? We'd like to be able to highlight those at the end of this video and on social platforms as well.
Okay, well, if in that case, I have to take the opportunity to highlight packagingnews.net, which is my packaging blog. I do have a lot of barcode content on there, quite a lot actually. That's 100% applicable to the kind of things that we were talking about today. And the other place that's always worth a visit is my LinkedIn page.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no. But I was just going to say my LinkedIn, I think my LinkedIn name is David J. Holliday.
Okay, we'll make sure to link that.
That's brilliant.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, David. This was great.